Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. It's your host that has the most, or maybe I have the least. I don't know. It's one of the hosts. You hear me on Mondays, so that's cool. You start your day with me if you do choose to listen, and if you're here, thanks for rocking with us. It's the day after Mother's Day that you'll be hearing this, so I'm recording this on Mother's Day morning, so can't really tell you how Mother's Day is going to go for me, but I think it'll be okay. Woke up early. I made mom breakfast. I made what did I make? Some spinach. I cooked that up in the frying pan. Made some spinach. Cut up some onions. Of course, the classic bacon. My mom's a fan of sunny side up eggs, so I made some sunny side up eggs, and I cut up some fruit, and she already had some coffee because my mom is a habitual early bird gets the worm kind of gal, so she gets up really early, probably around 7 or 8 o'clock, because when she used to work super early, she'd have to wake up 4, 5 o'clock in the morning just to get to work for 6:30, 7 o'clock. So back now, she just has that eternal clock to where she wakes up very, very early and she has to start her day that way. I used to be like that too. I used to wake up at 8 all the time. Even then, I would set an alarm for 8 o'clock because if I did need to get up and do something, my body would already be used to having to rise and awaken at this moment in time already. So it's a fail-safe program. I would encourage people who have troubles waking up to start setting their alarms earlier, so that way when you do need to wake up early, you already have your brain wakes up at that time, even if you just go right back to sleep. Granted, though, the downside is if you do this and go right back to sleep, you'll build up a tendency of hearing the alarm and then really, really going back to sleep. The best way to do it is to get up, I suppose. So you want to do that. But yeah, besides that, Mother's Day is looking like a strong thing. My mom's been remodeling the kitchen piece by piece during this whole coronavirus pandemic, and I decided to start chipping in a little bit more money involved in helping her get some stuff. So I got her some gift cards to different hardware stores, because if she doesn't go to the hardware store at least 3-4 times a week, I don't think that's my mother anymore. So I think that would help alleviate some of the back end costs of stuff. So I did that, and me and my sister chipped in for some decorative items to go inside of the kitchen when the whole thing is done, put our little piece in there. But, Mother's Day is cool. I love Mother's Day. All right. We probably should get into what we're going to talk about for real, though. But I love you, Mom. Shout out to moms. Shout out to all the good moms out there and all the moms, period. So first thing that we're going to talk about today on the College Football Podcast hosted by GSMC is Taulia Tagoviloa's brother, Taulia Yeah, Taulia. So he has decided that enough was enough. And he saw the writings on the wall. And even in a COVID-19 pandemic, which has been very much a stone in the calm pool of the sports, I guess, sports genres. I don't know. The sports world, I guess the pool of the sports has been ruptured by many, many different pebbles over the last 2.5 months. None bigger than COVID-19. In fact, they all stem from the big rock of COVID-19. And college is no different. In fact, colleges and many officials have been really, 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 really worried that people are going to be transferring out of camps and out of schools and out of programs a little bit without any second thought right now, and it's not good. It may not be good for them in the long haul, and some have encouraged not to do this and just wait it out and see where things lay in the next few months before you decide to up and transfer, especially considering that the transfer window, the transfer waiver that was proposed to start has been on hold now that we talked about last week. So I bring that up to say Mr. Tagoviloa, not the NFL quarterback recently drafted, but his brother, has entered the transfer portal from Alabama. And as a freshman last year, he only appeared in 5 games and completed 9 of 12 attempts for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. So if he remains in the transfer portal and leaves for another school, that means Alabama would already still have 3 scholarship quarterbacks on roster: redshirt junior Mac Jones, redshirt freshman Paul Tyson, and true freshman Bryce Young, with Mac Jones being the most experienced out of all 3 of them. He started 4 games in 2019. He went 97 for 141 attempts and for 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions against Michigan. In the Citrus Bowl, he went 16 for 25, 327, and 3 touchdowns. Tyson was a 4-star prospect alongside Tagoviloa in the class of 2019, ranked at 24/7 Sports as the 12th best pro-style quarterback, and Young was ranked as the number 2 overall player by 24/7 Sports in class of 2020 when he were enrolled at Alabama in January. So clearly, Tua knows, or I'm sorry, not Tua, Mr. Taulia is really seeing the writing on the wall, if I were to say, if he's seeing anything. He understands that when bringing in Bryce Young as a true freshman, that's something that doesn't typically happen too often for Alabama, for Nick Saban. They usually let the guy who's been here keep playing until it's time for them to graduate or time for them to move on to the draft or whatever the case may be. And then they bring up the next guy that's proven himself. And it shows that, one, he never really got the opportunity enough to prove himself, or he just didn't do enough for Nick Saban and crew to really think that he's the guy they can move forward with. They sign, and college football is as much about winning as it is about retooling year in and year out. And they went and got Bryce Young, who, in all accounts, is a super stud quarterback that, Alabama doesn't have that many in the last recent years. Quarterbacks that's come out and you say, yeah, that's going to be a stud quarterback, because it just hasn't happened. The best 2 quarterbacks that they've probably had as far as NFL talents just both went into the NFL draft, and one of them went to Oklahoma, of course. He transferred out and did a graduate transfer there. But this thing still applies. Bryce Young might be their 3rd best quarterback they've actually obtained so far. If everything on the accounts that coaches have seen, that his high school tape has shown, he's going to be really, really special. And unfortunately, that means our little brother is going to have to work and wait his turn even longer. And without any sufficient game tape, it's going to be hard for him to make it to the NFL as a quarterback and definitely get drafted nonetheless. He probably might make it to a walk-on spot or, undrafted as a quarterback if all things said and done, if he shows some flashes. But I have a hard time believing he's going to get drafted at all or even getting a look if he doesn't make this move now. So it makes sense. He sees the writing on the wall. He doesn't have time. You don't have time to wait in college anymore to wait your turn, because your turn can just be bypassed all the time. And that seems to be the case here. But let's go ahead and take a break, and we're getting to our next segment, which will be headlined by the best teams in each conference. That's coming up.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, so for this next segment, I was looking at some articles about who might be the best teams in each conference, and I ran across one that usually does one once every year for the start of the college football season about how to evaluate certain teams in each conference on a point system. So to account for teams that are considered developmental programs, thus they don't recruit a lot of 4- and 5-star prospects as their players overachieve their incoming star rating. Their prospects they give additional points. For example, Minnesota's Tanner Morgan, who is just the number 1,185th rated prospect coming out of high school, but he clearly played above that last season. Therefore, he is now considered a 4-star in this metric. Players who are underachieve their star rating are no longer, or their points are no longer lowered, though, because the point of this exercise is to measure potential. they could be mitigating circumstances beyond an overrated evaluation that has held a player back, like injuries. Finally, there are many players in the transfer portal awaiting word on a waiver to play next season. Therefore, several teams could be in line for a boost in these ratings between now and September. So this is the updated list. So for the Big Ten, here we go. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Purdue, Indiana, Michigan State, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Illinois, Maryland, Northwestern, and Rutgers. So let's look at this, right? Ohio State has 330 points. Penn State has 308. Michigan has 297. Purdue has 278 in the Big Ten. So this is very interesting to me because I enjoy Big Ten football like most people do, and I have a soft spot of seeing people succeed in achieving this conference because, you know, one, they're a pretty big feeder system for my New Orleans Saints, NFL favorite team, and Ohio State has been a quality contribution to the New Orleans Saints' efforts in trying to find success. So I appreciate Ohio State for that. But outside of personal biases, I just think they have fun divisions. They have a lot of history within their teams. Like Wisconsin is known for, and Wisconsin and Nebraska are pretty much known for producing linemen on a ridiculous amount of scale. Penn State has a strong historic program along with Michigan. And, you know, Michigan has had their personal struggles as of late, but they still are usually in the top 10, top 12 in recruiting year in and year out. So they definitely try to keep their program stocked up with great talent. Granted, they ran into the buzzsaw in the Big Ten that everybody has run into in that division, which is Ohio State. So it makes sense because a lot of this is built off of the idea of returning talent, and Ohio State does have quite a bit of returning talent on their end, especially Justin Fields, who is set to have a big year. Moving on to the SEC, Southeastern Conference, Georgia edges out Alabama. So Georgia has 356. Alabama has 333. Auburn, 299. Florida, 295. Tennessee, 292. A tie between South Carolina and Texas A&M at 288. LSU is at 8th at 287. Mississippi State, 282. Kentucky at 278. Missouri, 269. Mississippi, 259. Arkansas, 254. And Vanderbilt dead last at 246. All right, so I guess we got a few talking points here in the SEC. Everyone's been talking about LSU being basically bled to dry. They bled out after the national championship because they lost so much talent. They put 11 people in the NFL draft, and that's hard to replace on any team. They lost a lot of their coaching staff, and although they do have a few returning players like Jamar Chase, it's just this is where the reality of the situation is. They didn't have a lot of returning talent. Everybody's new. The quarterback's new. The offense will be newer. It will be changed up. It won't be the same level of pro-style Christmas that was really, really getting everybody just excited to watch. And that's really what the reality of the situation is. We like Ed Orgeron as a coach, and he has won national championship. He is proven in that way. But I don't know if we've ever seen him in this level of adversity. But you have to give him the benefit of the doubt because he won when nobody else thought he would last year. No one else really had any idea what Ed Orgeron was going to be capable of last season. So we only can see what's in front of us. And what's in front of us here is a roster that is nowhere close to the roster they had last year. So it only makes sense that they would be ranked this low, and they've been dropping in polls, or not polls, but in rankings and top 25 polls and all that stuff. So we see Georgia over Alabama, which makes sense to me because Georgia has probably had has been consistent in having one of the top 3 best rosters best program rosters in America for the last couple years. And it only makes sense that they bring the house again. Their defense was legendarily known last year as a really, really high-touted defensive unit that could only get better with time. They didn't lose a lot of people on either side of the ball, really. They did lose some good linemen, but they always produce good linemen. So does Alabama. So it just makes sense. It's not like it's extremely edged out, but Georgia was a top 3 recruit team. Same was Alabama. So it just makes sense. Auburn at 3 makes a lot of sense because I think they are the 3rd most talented and most consistent team outside of Georgia and Alabama in the SEC. So I would think that Auburn has a good chance of really being that team that might upset some people. All right, let's move on. Big 12, right? Oklahoma 303, Texas 301, Iowa State 264, then TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State, tie between Kansas State, West Virginia, Kansas, and then Texas Tech at the last. So Oklahoma did lose quite a bit of talent. We all know about their touted wide receiver that went in the draft, that went to the Cowboys, and we know that Jalen Hurts went in the 2nd round. So they're going to do a little bit of rebuilding, but they're still very strong. They still have a brilliant offensive-minded head coach. Texas had a better year than maybe many had expected outside of the Texas, circle. They weren't horrible, but they weren't the best, but they're moving up. It was a positive turn of events for Texas, and I think they'll be a better unit this coming season. Then we move to Pac-12, Oregon, 319, Washington, 278, USC, 273, UCLA, 267, then California, then Stanford, then Arizona State, Arizona, Washington State, Utah, Colorado, Oregon State. Oregon is probably far and away has been the best team in the last 10 years of the Pac-12, and really it hasn't been too close. And Washington has been a team that does pump out a lot of quarterbacks or quarterback talent. A lot of numbers come out of there. So ACC real quickly, Clemson at 300. There's a tie for Florida State and Notre Dame in 295. Then there's Virginia Tech and North Carolina. Miami is 6, Pittsburgh, then Wake Forest, then Georgia Tech, then NC State, Duke, Syracuse, Louisville, and Virginia are tied, and Boston College at 15. Wake Forest over Georgia Tech and NC State are very marginable, but it makes a lot of sense because NC State has been suffering due to a lot of a lot of conference recruits, a lot of in-state recruits that are really big time. You lose them out to Clemson, really, because they're so close together. That's one of the toughest things going on in that region. But overall, this is a pretty interesting way of looking at metrics for teams, and I look forward to seeing how this changes over time. But we're going to take another break, and we're going to get into some John Harbaugh things because we love talking about our man from Michigan.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, first I'd like to say, before we start the segment, that I keep calling Jim Harbaugh when I want to talk about, I keep calling John Harbaugh's name when I really want to talk about Jim, the coach of Michigan. So, my bad. It's Jim. It always will be Jim. That's Jim. Jim on this show, unless John decides to go coach college for some reason. So, Jim Harbaugh, coach of Michigan, head coach of Michigan, has some suggestions that he wanted to make about how to help NFL prospects in the future. He wrote an open letter that is his opinions alone, not reflecting the university's opinions. But he had 3 proposals that he believes would reshape the future of college football players and the game in general. So he said in the first one that an individual could choose to declare for the professional draft after any season he chooses, and if he is drafted within the first 224 picks of the NFL draft or chooses to sign a free agent contract, he would forego remaining college eligibility. However, if the individual is not drafted within the first 224 picks of the NFL draft, he would be able to return to college football if he chooses without penalty, provided he remains in academic compliance and does not receive payment from an agent. I think that right there is pretty good. That's pretty good, I think. Now, I believe that in a perfect world, this would make all the sense in the world, that this is leading to the one and done rule being in American football. However, I do think that this would really, really start showing the 2 and done rule. So guys who are essentially, they play their first season and they play their second season, that would be their third year now. And then they would go, because they could go after the first, and I'm sure people would if this scenario would happen. But it's just it's very hard for me to just fathom the idea that somebody needs to have, that only needs 1 year of college football. It's just really tough for me to see that. There's just so much development that goes on within college college football that you would assume that you need more than just 1 year, right? I would think so. That would be really, really, it might water down your league, or it may end up having similar repercussions as it did with basketball in the early 90s, where these guys were coming out and then they would be overpaid and they would just fuel out because they just didn't have sometimes it wasn't about talent, of course. That was more about money. On this side, it's more like talent-wise, you'd have more rough diamonds that aren't refined, or you'd have a lot of athletes, but you wouldn't have a lot of ball players because they weren't able to hone their skills in college enough. And a lot of these guys who end up going into the first round, a lot of them aren't as successful as you would like to be anyway, and they play for 3 or 4 years. So who's to say that coming out earlier would be any better? But at the same time, maybe this means that coming under the tutelage of NFL scouts and coaches at an early age would benefit. So it could go a little bit both ways. The second proposal was that an individual leaving college early prior to graduation who signs an NFL contract would be entitled to complete his degree while in the NFL or return to the institution that he left to continue his college career as a student once his pro career was completed. So this is I feel like this is a rule that would make the moms happy, like the education people happy. And I don't know how well this would sit with people who believe that this would just be a distraction, so to speak, and it would not help people focus 100% on football. But at the same time, we say this now, right, with how education system works with collegiate football and collegiate sports in general. A lot of guys, let's admit it, a lot of guys who go to college are not, and playing football, are not going for medical degrees, and the degree paths and the classes they take are kind of hand-picked and hand-chosen by certain people that work within the coaching office that are looking for the best interest of some guys, because let's face it, college is not for everybody, but in order to get into the NFL, you do have to go to school for 3 years. And 3 years of college can be pretty daunting for even kids who are not going in the NFL. So it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of personal choices that reflect wanting to get good grades. And I'm not saying that there's academic scandals going all over the country, but I'm sure there are, but that's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at here is that a lot of these classes are not designed to challenge some of these guys to bring to, critical thinking or supreme levels of, academic and scholarly work. Sometimes it's just busy work. Sometimes it's just do this, that, and the third to get the grade that you need. And it's like gaming the system. Everybody games the system in college at a certain point, because not every class you want to take, not every class you're interested in, people figure it out, how to get through it. And with collegiate sports, people definitely figure out how to get through it, because they don't have time to just sit here and fail. Because anybody who fails in collegiate sports nowadays really just didn't try to do anything at all, right? So most of anybody who makes it to Division I are pretty much set up to pass their classes. So it's not ideal to believe that this would not be the same case if they ended up going to the NFL and getting a contract, especially since they'd be getting paid anyway. So they get paid, they'll get a degree that 9 times out of 10 they won't need for very long unless they don't manage their money right. And if they're if they're good enough to get into the NFL, especially early on, without having to go to eligibility, this would be really, really interesting to see how you using as a bargaining tool, right? For parents who are uncertain and things like that. And a lot of kids come out. Like, they still are taught that you should still go to college and get a higher education because that's something that they can't take away from you, and that lasts even beyond the game. So it'll be interesting. I like to see where else they take that. And then the third one is broadening the rules to permit a student athlete and his family to consult with and seek advice on or before signing a professional contract from lawyers and agents, so long as the student athlete does not receive compensation. This makes all the sense in the world to me. You should be able to speak to somebody who knows more about contracts and negotiations and figuring things out before you sign something that you may end up regretting. This is not saying that you do this because you're unsure of your own abilities. You may believe yourself 100% in the world that you are the best football player to ever walk the earth, and you're going to leave your freshman year. But it still would be really challenging for a young man who's just fresh out of high school, essentially, 1 year removed from, to just think, okay, this is how I should be going about my professional career without any prior talking to with an agent or a lawyer, especially a contract like the NFL. You don't know what the contract would look like. And even then, we're seeing things now like in the NBA with all these one and done guys. Guys are even bypassing college altogether and going straight into the G League and doing this G League program where the NBA can mold these guys into not only better athletes, but smarter athletes that know how to live an NBA life without getting catapulted inside straight from college, right? This is better than just coming straight out of high school because you'll have guidance. You'll still get money, more than you've ever made in your whole life, and you still will be able to go up against borderline NBA level talent in the G League, learning NBA level ways of playing the game of basketball and the tricks of the trade. So if the NFL can, or should I say college football, can offer this for the NFL in some form, shape, or fashion, at least the beginning part of agents talking, because we already had agents talking to one and dones before, and take some advice from guys like that, and we'll see. And a lot of this, like the first proposal, you've seen a bit within, baseball and things like that, where you can kind of buy, skip out and you can go straight out of high school into AA programs or AAA programs, things like that. You don't have to go to school in order to do this. But let's take another break, and coming out, we're going to talk about the state of college football across America.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So everybody wants college football in the fall. Everybody's working towards that goal, but with the ongoing pandemic across the country, across the world, and there doesn't seem to be any real way of knowing when this will subside for the U.S. and for sports to be able to return to what they need to be, at least to play with no fans. It's going to be hard to see a world where collegiate sports happens in the fall for a lot of different reasons. Some think that because of how the virus is slowly adapting and changing, and we're finding new stuff about it every day. It does not seem like we'll be having students on campus this fall, and it's very possible that if there's no students, they won't have college football. But also, state officials are making choices themselves that could potentially mean college football will not happen for certain states as well. So, Oregon Governor Kate Brown released a plan on Thursday for slowly reopening the state, which includes holding no sporting events with large crowds in the near future. Brown's plan includes 3 phases of restarting public life and business amid the coronavirus pandemic. The plan includes not holding large group gatherings like concerts or sporting events through at least September. Counties can start reopening under phase 1 as early as May 15th, and if they see declining levels of COVID-19 hospital admissions over the 14-day period, the minimum levels of testing and contact tracing capacity. Restaurants and bars can open if customers stay 6 feet apart, and gyms must set a maximum limit of people and require physical distancing. Local gatherings cannot exceed 25 people, and the specifics of Phase 2 are still being worked out, but will be decided based on the data collected in Phase 1. The goal of Phase 2 is to further expand gathering sizes. In Phase 3, concerts, festivals, and sporting events with fans will not be possible until a reliable treatment or prevention is available. So, Brown wants all large gatherings canceled or significantly modified through at least September. So, as they approach football season, they can see how disease is behaving in our community, what kind of steps could be taken by the team themselves and the coaches and others around the team to see if they can safely start. And from Seidlinger said, per the Oregon, the Oregon, if or when those activities resume, they would be likely without the fans in the stands, but hopefully the fans watching them from a screen in the safety of their own home would be great. So this is something that a lot of people have already spoken about as far as the idea of no fans and all of the likes in every major sport. Right now we have Korean baseball going, which is exciting if you're into baseball and you like watching the sport, no matter who's playing and what's happening. But we do have to realize that there was a place in, I believe, Korea recently that they didn't have any cases of COVID-19 for 2 straight days, and then somebody went out for 2 nights in a row to, I think, a few bars, and then the next day they had 2,000 cases of COVID-19. So it's really unpredictable of when you think the curve is actually really flattened, and a lot of places are still dealing with the fact that it can just come and bounce back, and that's something that we all need to be pretty aware of, that this is not something that you just wait out and it dies on its own. This is something that can repeatedly come up, and that's why the idea of vaccines are so prevalent, because without a vaccine, this thing will just keep coming back and forth, and that's why a lot of people there's no real good, solid contingency plan going all the way. So everybody's just kind of working from scratch. Every time they think they make progress on a plan, they have to go back to the drawing board and think about what all can really transpire and how much can you really do. And I know the UFC just came back and they started doing stuff in Florida, and from all accounts, it was a pretty successful event that shows promise for certain events to come back slowly and surely with no fans and menial levels of contact. But even they had 2 fighters test positive for coronavirus, and I believe they weren't able to fight. So that's just one thing that can't really happen. So Penn State's football coach James Franklin also spoke more about this, saying that he can't imagine all schools opening at the same time. He told ESPN's Heather Dinich, if the SEC, for example, opens up a month earlier than the Big Ten, then the Big Ten is able to open up. And 12 of the 14 schools, if 2 schools can't open, I don't see any conference penalizing 80% or 75% of the schools because 25 of them can't open. So Franklin added that he believes holding the entire conference back when 2 or 3 schools have the ability to open limits the entire conference. You're hurting the conference as a whole in terms of your ability to compete. And ESPN notes that the Big Ten Commissioner, Kevin Warren, has previously said this situation is so fluid and that the Big Ten has no timeline to make a decision regarding possible games. The discussion that ADs are having about fall sports have been canceled or being canceled is a very real possibility, says Ramogi Huma, the president of National College Players Association. It's extremely hard to imagine any football in the fall on any level. So this is not just college, but this is also NFL. But at the same time, we're seeing people like, the NFL is chugging straight ahead. They're going to figure this out because they are determined to have a season next year or this upcoming season. They are determined to do it. Players are going to be playing. Players want to play. They want their money, and they're going to figure this out because not only they're not really doing it because, the world needs sports. I mean, I'm sure there's a part of that they want to provide a service that a lot of people enjoy and have a lot of feelings towards sports anyway. But let's keep in mind here that this is a money thing. They have television networks and things like that, and there's been ideas thrown out like selling a certain amount of packages for different days. So like instead of doing the Sunday, Monday, Thursday night, maybe you just spread them out during the week. So that way that way everybody gets a chance to watch as much football as possible, one, which would be awesome. And two, let's say Apple or Hulu or Netflix want to get inside the NFL game for at least one season, one time only. You get a contract to play or to have your network or your platform host NFL for this season alone. And right then and there is just one season. It's like a free-for-all on networks. And I think that would be exciting. But the NFL is trying to figure this thing out slowly but surely. They're going to find a way to make this viable and valuable for all different types. And college is a little bit more complex because it's not like the players will be risking their bodies and their health for no money, right? Who's going to force these kids to play if they don't feel safe? And I'm sure they want to go play. Everybody wants to play their sport at this point in time. Nobody wants to just sit at home and not play. But with the student part of the student athlete still has to count at some point. They're not going to be taking classes unless it's online. And it would just be weird that they're taking online classes, not at the university, but they still have to go to practice. They still have to basically live on the campus with no ways of knowing if it's safe to do that, if there's any sort of precautions that they're going to have to take besides cleaning and staying and listening to health officials, but just no way. Because at the end of the day, and from all accounts, the virus is going to spread without a vaccine no matter what we do. This is more about limiting hospital visits, things like that. So we need to free up hospital beds and all that to be able to take the stress off of the medical field when it comes to this virus. So a lot of people are thinking that sports should be able to come back if that's the case. But you got to remember, if somebody catches it in a sport that they're playing with multiple people, and then they bring it home, and then maybe they go bring it home, and then they go to work because places are opening up slowly but surely, things spread again. So it's not about this unless you want total isolation. But let's take another break, and we'll get into some NCAA football, the EA Sports game.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So I encourage everyone to go check out an article written by Ross Dillinger of SI talking about name, image, and likeness and the reason why NCAA video games can't come back as of yet under the current restrictions and under new proposals made by the NCAA, because although they are trying to make progress on the idea of name, image, and likeness and trying to get players compensated, it does not mean that the game will be any well received or even started, because of all the legal hurdles, and just licensing is very, very difficult to get when you can't do it efficiently. So group licensing has historically been a professional sports concept, and it was negotiated by a players union. And the players union usually is the one that's able to get commercialized sports. And there's a lot of companies that specialize in group licensing. And without the NCAA agreeing, even if the fans want it, the players want it, the different distribution companies want it, so the publishing companies want it, if the NCAA isn't on board, it's not going to happen. And we have a lot of quotes from this article. So group licensing would open the door to the overlooked player. So still part of the football team's success, but without the branding, name recognition, or gaudy stats of a Lawrence. Take, for instance, a starting offensive lineman or a rotating defensive back. Under group licensing deals, they'll each get a cut, and at a very least receiving an annual 3-figure check from a video game and earning royalties from merchandise sales. Those in the industry refer to group licensing as an easy route to player income. Athletes would need to travel for photo shoots, film videos on their smartphones to craft social media ads. This would avoid one of the administrator's chief concerns about name, image, and likeness. Athletes already juggling schoolwork, class schedules, and sports training will be burdened with money-making NIL ventures. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, in an interview this week with SI, says he hears about this issue from the athletic directors. There are very clear messages that student athletes have significant time demands, and adding this activity is only going to demand more time, and the concerns about the focus of academics are there too. So there are a lot of different hoops that people have to jump through in order to get this deal done, but unfortunately, the NCAA has just made it more complex. So the report coming from the NCAA did lift some amateur principles, like the amateurs principles, and it kept intact remains of a bygone era, introducing restrictions on how players can profit from their name, image, and likeness. Among those notable, athletes can't partner with schools for name, image, and likeness ventures and use school or conference logos in such endeavors, and are barred from entering group licensing deals. So those restrictions are basically saying you can't have NCAA video games. You can't market Trevor Lawrence on a cover with his Clemson logo on it. It's just never going to happen. And the restrictions only recommendations at this point will prevent the return of the college football games, while also making near impossible the wide distribution of trading cards and memorabilia jerseys. So the three biggest players that's partnering with one team partners. So these guys typically are the partners companies like that NFLPA and the MLBPA, and it's for maximum the value of group licensing. So the three biggest players are Panini, which is a licensing for sports training cards and collective memorabilia, Electronic Arts, so EA Sports, and Fanatics, which are retail sports apparel and equipment. So they are willing to bring these products to fans, and everybody else is on board, of course, besides the NCAA. And I think that this will eventually have to change, because I don't think that the current structure of what was proposed and talked about in this document by the NCAA is actually going to ever stick, really. Not because of it's really because of how bare bones it is, and it's not really making a real solid plan for players to accommodate them not making money from the school. So yeah, sure, they say players can make money off of their name, image, and likeness, but it doesn't help all the players. It doesn't help people who are just playing to try and make it to the league, but also putting their bodies on the line. It's only helping the top 2-3% of players who would even get a sponsorship deal. Like, outside of their own state, there's no one going to be getting national deals unless they are a instant rock star, right? So let's take Joe Burrow, for example. Joe Burrow last year was a rock star upon rock stars in college sports. One of the biggest college sporting stars and stories, him and Ed Orgeron and the LSU Tigers in the last 10 years. And even he would be one of the very few people that would get not just a state sponsorship deal or anything like that, but a national one. So like maybe with Nike or anything like that, they would partner with him. And maybe I'm over exaggerating. Maybe Nike and Adidas or Reebok or whoever would seize these athletes as potential, and they'd put them on, certain threshold deals and see how it goes. But at the same time, I don't think outside of the typical sports market where we see guys like doing commercials for like Nissan or doing stuff for Kia or car commercials or State Farm and things like that, because this is college sports at the end of the day. And these guys have not been able to make a gigantic name for themselves to the point to where they're household names. So they're not Tom Brady, they're not Chris Paul, they're not Drew Brees, they're not these Aaron Rodgers, especially. They're not these super big megastar athletes that you see in every talk show, everything like that. College sports is still one of those places where, even in sports media, it's not, unless you're specifically talking about collegiate sports, it's not the biggest conversation driver. That's still the NFL, that's still the NBA, that's even still the MLB to some extent. And then it comes college sports or college basketball is probably before the MLB and college football, but that's only in season, right? The NBA is year long, the NFL is year long conversation, out and out and out and out. So it wouldn't be talked about nationally as much. So people are trying to fight for everybody to get a piece of the pie, because if you just want to get the 1%ers a piece of the pie, technically they're already getting it in different ways, illegally or legally. They're getting it somewhere at a certain point. But group licensing will help get players money that you already technically give them anyway through scholarships and things like that. It should just be a part of the deal, what is a lot of people think should be anyway. It should be a part of the deal. And I think it'd be beneficial to look at it that way instead of looking at it as a headache for the NCAA, because it's not really a headache if you really, really look at the grand scheme of how this thing is going to be devised in the first place. And you'd make so much money off of it. People would be applauding you. And I don't see where the distraction comes from. Where does distraction come from a video game coming back? They're going to play too much video games? I mean, they already play video games anyway. They're just going to make a few more dollars? Like, we're not talking like they're going to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars off a video game for name, image, and likeness in a group licensing deal. I just don't think that's going to be the thing that happens. But a few $100s in royalties, I think that's pretty fair. I think that's fair to bring a series that's beloved by many sports fans and is deeply missed to come back for a few $100s per player. And it's not like, maybe it's the financial investment, but I think that NCAA can handle themselves pretty well. But we're going to take another break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about another concession confession.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, so this week for Concession Confessions, we got to talk about America's number one food that they're known for. So in my opinion, there's probably like a top three that America's known for sure. I think when you think about America, you think about the traditional stuff, the things that people who go to the country for the first time, like, I got to try this. I think number one has to be a classic hamburger. And then two would probably be French fries. And then I really don't know. Three could be a toss up. Some people might say fried chicken. Some people might say barbecue chicken. It just depends. But there's no arguing the top two for me, personally, I think. And I think that burgers are just so culturally, they've changed so much over the time. And a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on burgers. Some people think burgers need to be all the way cooked. Some people think burgers can be cooked the same way as you would a steak. And that means for a juicier burger. Some people like medium rare burgers. Some people like medium well burgers. Some people like well done burgers. It's just the meat. Burgers can be really gourmet. You know how I feel about gourmet stuff in stadiums and stuff. But you can have different types of meat, different parts of the cow in a burger, or you can, there's different types of burgers too. So black bean burgers are really good. Turkey burgers, chicken burgers, salmon burgers. There's all different types of burgers. But the infamous sandwich in itself, in stadiums, I feel, have a certain way of getting too crowded. And in my opinion, the simpler the burger might be the better, as long as, well, let me say this. The bun, it plays a very, 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 very important role in whether a burger is going to be good in the first place. The first thing you will really taste in a burger is the crunch of the bun. And if the bun is no good, and the bun is mushy and it flattens really hard, it's just like it's stuck at the roof of your mouth, that burger is probably not going to be the best thing you've ever eaten. And 9 times out of 10, when you go to a stadium, your buns are pretty similar to that description. But when you get to a stadium and they have burger buns that are toasted and a little bit more crunchy side rather than the mushy side, that's when you start to step into a new dimension, a new tier. So we're just going to talk about that tier first. So I think when you have a quality bun, then you're probably going to have a better patty anyway. And I'm not really going to just step into the debate on whether, medium well or medium or well done burgers or where is that, because I think that's all based on personal preference. Now, when we go to steaks, that's a whole different conversation. But for burgers, it's a bit different. I've had them all different. And, I think medium is a bit weird to me personally. But a medium well burger seems pretty fair. It's juicy and it keeps the richness of the burger and keeps the flavor there. And well done, I've had it before. I don't really have a in particular problem for it, but they can be a little bit tougher to go through. But this is about what you put on the burger, not just the burger itself. So, of course, the condiments list, there's ketchup, mustard, relish, there's mayonnaise, there's barbecue sauce, there's chipotle sauce. There's a whole bunch of different types of sauces you can put on a burger. I think at minimum, or at maximum, I should say, minimum, one sauce is necessary. I think sauce on a bun, but not over sauced, is quality, especially if it complements the other elements of the burger. And sauce is necessary for well done burgers, in my opinion, because well done burgers probably tend to be more dry than burgers who are in the more medium variety and on the rare side. So you need a little bit more sauce to make not to dry your mouth out to death. With that said, if you have more than 2 sauces, it's probably not going to be good for you, in my opinion. And I think that as far as the range of sauces, I think there's clear combinations like ketchup and mustard. People do that all the time. People do ketchup and mayo. People do barbecue sauce and mustard. I've done that a few times. I like the tanginess of the mustard with the barbecue sauce. Shoot me. I don't care. That's my thing. But then we get into they're physical, but non-liquidated condiments. So, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, onions, bacon, cheeses, different types of cheeses. Listen, the bacon, lettuce, tomato is cool. The bacon, lettuce, tomato, onion, then cheese, but then the onions are fried and the bun has sesame seeds on it, or when we start putting chips in our burgers, or then when we start putting fries in our burgers, I think we're starting to reach a combination here where it's sometimes too much. You got all these cowboy burgers, and then you have these Outback burgers, and then you have these horseradish burgers, and then you have all this other stuff that gets out of control. This is not a dining experience. I didn't come here to buy a $16 burger. I came here to get a burger, or something to eat rather, to enjoy my game with my beverage of choice. I'm not here to experience gourmet burgers at a ballpark. Now, if you offer it, cool. But you just need to cool it out. You don't need every topping you have in the kitchen on the burger for it to be enjoyable or just to say it's gourmet. The gourmet part should be because of the quality of the meat you have, how well it looks. You're not just packing in a whole bunch of different condiments and things you can put on top of the patty in order to satisfy your customers in thinking that this is better than what you would get a plain burger. Just because a burger is quote unquote plain doesn't mean it's any less than a burger that has 5 or 6 different toppings and condiments on the burger. If I get a good, nicely well toasted bun, buttered nice, a quality patty in between, a cheese that it could be American, it could be Swiss, it could be pepper jack, it could be Colby jack, it could be cheddar. I don't care. Put a piece of cheese on it, that's fine. You want lettuce on your burger? That's fine too. Sometimes I've recently have been kind of out on the lettuce thing, and sometimes it comes in waves. I don't really like lettuce on my burgers too much. I might even get spicy and put some bacon on it, put some sauce, barbecue, maybe some mustard, some Dijon if I'm feeling a little bit more of the tanginess side of it, and then call it done. That's a burger for me. That's it. I don't need fried onions. I don't need toasted peppers. I don't need I'm not a big pickle guy on my burgers, but somehow I'll still eat them, especially like if they're on a Chick-fil-A sandwich or whatever, but that's just me. And, you know, people vary. Of course, some people like the extravagance of putting 6 different things on a burger before they eat it. But after the first bite, how much is that staying on the burger? In fact, if you need to put a toothpick in your burger at a ballpark, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion. If you have to cut a burger in half at a ballpark, you're probably doing it wrong, in my opinion. I should say that, because food topics can get really touchy. And people get close to home with them because that's how they live their life. And I understand that. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh man, your trial and error with food is terrible and mine is the only supreme opinion. Because opinions are no longer right and wrong. They're just opinion. I just feel like it's not sensible or cost effective to have 6 different toppings and condiments on a burger for something that probably isn't going to be as good as you'd want it to be, when you're not going to a burger spot, you're not going to a steakhouse that may have a nice special burger, or you're not even going to your local Old Charlie's that have specialized burgers or things like that. You're at a ballpark watching a game that you already spent a good amount of money on. Your beer is probably overpriced, and now you're about to buy a $16 burger, which is just too much. But with that said, that'll be the GSMC College Football Podcast, hosted on the GSMC Podcast Network. I encourage you all to rate and review the podcast. 5 stars. You know, every review counts. Thanks for rocking with us, and we'll be back next week. Don't forget to follow us on our social media and interact with us. We do great things. We don't bite. Signing out here. See you guys next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.